Hello everyone, my name is Pixelriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're starting off here in the Nether so I can show you my newly redesigned Piglin bartering farm. And yes, I did have to abandon the diagonal design. There were some really helpful suggestions in the comments about how we could work on that and how we could restructure the way the gold ingots were dispensed, but in the end I decided I was just going to move it to a much more straightforward design. So here we are, with a bunch of piglins lining this straight corridor which leads out to the Nether Fortress, the Blaze Spawner, and beyond. And while I don't plan on sticking around the Nether for a great deal longer today, I at least want to show you how this works. I have been working on a bit on the decor as well, but that still needs a bit of work. Each of these chests down here currently has a bunch of bartered goods in them, and I have to be a little bit careful if there are any other piglins who wander in, because this whole thing isn't exactly sealed off yet. But the gold ingots go in our minecart chest here. By flicking this lever, it gets sent up across the hoppers as it did on the diagonal, but this time on a much more navigable straight line. The hopper minecart comes back to rest there, and then this lever here actually activates a line of redstone that comes out behind the back of the farm, and that's what enables or disables the hopper clock back here using a redstone torch underneath that and just inverting the signal by switching the lever on in front of that block. That, as before, has 16 items in which go back and forth between these two hoppers, activating the dispensers along the back here, and with 8 piglins in a row, the redstone dust stretches 15 blocks along here. But I figured if we powered it from the middle, then that would provide adequate space for us to expand the farm, because the power only gets to about, 7 redstone signal on this side. So if I switch the farm on using this lever now, all of these piglins get fed with a gold ingot. We've got a couple of shroom lights up in here behind the crimson trapdoors to light the tunnel up a little bit. Not that that's doing anything for mob spawning, but I think it looks kind of pretty. And the hopper clock is going to activate every so often, making sure that these piglins get thrown a gold ingot, and all of their bartering stuff ends up in the chest down here. One of the things I'm going to be working on between episodes is a storage system below this walkway that's going to filter everything that we get from all of these chests. It's going to hopefully divide up all of the stackable items at any rate, and all of the unstackables like potions and enchanted books are going to end up in a separate chest at the end to be sorted later, and that way we're going to be able to go and grab whatever we want to from the chests. If we're just after gravel, quartz, ender pearls, anything like that, all of that's going to be sorted out underneath here. But today we're going to head back to the overworld, and we're going to do a bit of exploring, because there is a biome I want to talk about that we haven't managed to encounter yet. Here in my storage system, which you may remember I sorted into minerals over here on the left-hand side and organic stuff over here on the right-hand side, and I guess technically minerals are organic too or whatever, because it all comes from the earth, but you know what I mean. This stuff over here, the dirt types, gravel, podzol, sand, all of that stuff, is missing one particular material, and I've had glass here as a placeholder, and this has kind of become a more permanent glass chest, so I'm thinking I might actually end up expanding my storage system a little further into the hill to accommodate a couple of blocks we've managed to gather in abundance in the meantime, and glass is going to be one of those. We want to remove the glass from this though, and we're going to replace it with the material we are hopefully going to go out and find today. I want to get hold of some mycelium, and that is going to require a trip to a biome that we haven't seen on camera on YouTube yet, but I was able to locate a couple of as I was flying around either off camera or in live streams. We are going to find a mushroom island. So with all of our stuff squared away from the bartering farm and a reasonable amount of space made in my inventory, we're going to head out, I believe, to the northeast. We need to go a little bit more north than east, because this place is about 4,000 blocks away from our spawn point. But it should be a pretty smooth flight, and as long as we don't encounter any more remarkable landmarks on the way, I'm going to come back to you folks when we're ready to introduce the Mushroom Island. And here it is, swimming into view. Not the largest mushroom island I've seen, but a pretty decent sized one overall. We've got a pretty decent landmass here. This is a mushroom island, and as you can see, it lives up to the name. There are giant mushrooms everywhere, like the kind that you'll find in dark oak forests. There are lots of mushrooms growing here happily on the surface, and there are even a couple of cows down here who look a little different from the standard cows. These are mooshrooms, or mushroom cows, and they act pretty similar to the way regular cows do. When killed, they will give you beef and leather, but we're not going to kill them quite yet, because there's a couple of other fun things that we can do with them. In the meantime, the landscape is made out of this perhaps slightly confusing dirt variant. And if we dig up some of this with our Silk Touch shovel, we'll be able to obtain it, and you'll see that this right here is mycelium. Now, mycelium works in the same way that a lot of the other dirt variants do. You can right-click on it to create some dirt path. I do not believe you can hoe it for farmland. I think that exclusively works on dirt and coarse dirt and grass. I believe Podzol and mycelium are exceptions to that. But either way, as you can see, it starts to slowly spread to nearby dirt blocks and will take them over in much the same way grass does. Now, there is this myth that mycelium and grass will actually take each other over, and that's not actually the case. Mycelium and grass will both try and spread to nearby dirt blocks, but they don't end up trying to take over one another. So grass doesn't spread to mycelium blocks, mycelium doesn't spread to grass blocks. I don't know quite how that myth started, but for a while people believed that to be the case. It might even be related to the fact that some people like to convert Mushroom Island to grass, because if you bring a block of grass here, the grass color is exceptionally bright. It's very, very vivid green, and unfortunately I don't have any grass on me right now, so I'll have to go and grab some more. You also cannot bone meal the surface of mycelium. That's not a way of spreading mushrooms like the ones you see here on the surface. But of course, with all of these giant mushrooms around, it's possible if you're using a regular tool and not a Silk Touch tool to break down these blocks to get hold of some mushrooms that way. And then of course, if you bone meal one of these mushrooms, it will turn into a giant mushroom like the kind that we see all around us, and you can get a pretty renewable mushroom farm going here. But one of the key features of a mushroom island, and one that people like to take advantage of, is what happens when the sun goes down. Or perhaps more accurately, what doesn't happen when the sun goes down. Because the sun is setting on the horizon, the moon is rising, nighttime has begun, and normally in any other biome, unlit as this one is, I haven't placed any torches or anything since I have been here, mob spawning would start to occur in the area around us. And I expect a certain amount of it is happening around us in the oceans. We might start to see some drowned popping up to the surface, or we might even see a few monsters coming up from nearby caves. But as far as the surface of a mushroom island goes, no mob spawns whatsoever except for the mushrooms. And that is a very intentional thing. Hostile mobs do not spawn in mushroom islands. In fact, the biome itself, if we look at the F3 debug here, is called mushroom fields, because sometimes classifying these as islands is inaccurate. Sometimes they are actually part of land formations and can even be landlocked. So the biome designation was changed to mushroom fields a while ago. As you can see though, no sign of hostiles whatsoever, even with the moon rising as it is, and not a full moon, but still a moon that would be producing a fair amount of local difficulty to add to all of the mobs spawning on the surface. And while Minecraft 1.18 did of course change things so that the radius of torchlight or any other light source block spawn-proofs the entire area around it, there is a certain amount of appeal to being able to build with no restrictions whatsoever on where light needs to be and where it cannot be. Now, it is worth noting that not every single block inside of the mushroom island like this is necessarily going to be inside the mushroom fields biome, and the biome itself, not the mycelium, is what determines whether or not mobs spawn here. So it is not entirely uncommon to find an area, often with some patches of grass here and there because it generates over the border into another biome, where mobs can spawn on the very edges of mushroom islands like this, where the mushroom fields biome gives way to something like a deep ocean, like the one we've got right here. If we were to build out along the side here with a few blocks of mycelium into our deep ocean, I'll even throw a little bit of dirt alongside this as well. The mob cap is probably already filled up by a bunch of mobs in the caves below, but if we look down onto this dirt patch down here from the top of our scaffolding, we might eventually start to see some mobs spawning there. Yep, as you can see, a spider has spawned over there and has wandered up onto the mushroom island. While the rest of this area is completely safe, some areas around the periphery might not be. And so it's kind of important, if you want to set up a safe base on a mushroom island, to make sure that there aren't any blocks of neighboring biomes that have crept over into the territory of your safe island. With that explanation complete, I am going to sleep to make it daytime, because honestly I prefer working during the day. But the other thing we have to consider is the verticality of this biome and how safe the underground of this mushroom island is. If we're talking about building a base here and we're talking about being free from hostile mob spawns, we also also have to consider what is below us. And it seems like this mushroom island does have a couple of cave entrances, and as we go down into here, of course there are hazards like lava present, but aside from that, we actually shouldn't see any hostile mobs spawning below the surface either, because below the surface, the biome, the mushroom fields, actually extends vertically downwards. It seems like this cave was a bit of a damp squib. It didn't really lead anywhere, just led down to a lava fall and not much else, but there should be a couple of other cave entrances, and in theory, we're also going to see some of the cave generation below this that we see in other parts of the world. It's perhaps more likely that you'll find flooded caves throughout a lot of the Mushroom Island because the area is so often adjacent to water. But as we go down here into the caves, where there's actually a little bit of mycelium generating as well, you'll see that we are having a pretty mob-proof experience, give or take, once again, the mushroom cows on the surface. But hostile mobs are not going to be present underneath here unless the biome category changes. And that's something we need to bear in mind, because it's no longer the case that a surface biome will be the biome all the way down to the bottom of the world. There are 3D pockets of biomes like lush caves and dripstone caves which can spawn mobs. We also need to make sure that we're staying underneath the boundary of the Mushroom Island. It's so often possible to get disoriented in caves and walk outside of the footprint of the biome that we see on the surface. So as I walk a little bit further out here, I might be heading out into something like the ocean biome that surrounds us. And at that point, the normal spawning rules of the world would take over and we'd be able to find hostile mobs basically anywhere. But as long as we stay within the boundary of the Mushroom Island, we are pretty safe from mob spawns even if we go caving. So for people who like playing in survival but really don't like the experience of caving, if you don't like hostile mobs creeping up on you a whole bunch, then maybe consider locating a mushroom island. How exactly do we do that, though? That is the big question, because mushroom islands don't have any kind of handy locator maps in the way that things like Ocean Monuments and Woodland Mansions do. You do have to go out and find them yourself, and they are, frankly, quite a rare biome. Often people will use external tools and websites like Chunkbase or Amidst to go looking for mushroom islands in their world seed, basically loading up a map using the world seed that can show you a top-down view of where all of the biomes in your world are. And while I haven't done that for this one, I actually found this one more or less by accident as I was traveling out to another landmark in the world. I think it may have been on the way to one of the other landmarks in the world, like a woodland mansion or the desert or something like that I happened to fly past this one. Sometimes these biomes are desirable enough to people that they just go ahead and look up the location of one of these, because there are very few of them in the world. They are a pretty rare biome, and most of the time the game will try to spawn them in large areas of ocean. So if you're committed to not using external tools to look up the location of this, and you haven't found one so far, then what are your options? Honestly, I think the easiest way to locate a mushroom island, it's going to take a while, but is probably worth flying around large areas of ocean on your Elytra, because the two mushroom islands I found, there was one that's actually a little smaller than this, so I didn't really think it was great for this demonstration, but the two mushroom islands I have found, I've just flown over a large stretch of ocean and there's been a mushroom island conveniently nearby. If you don't have the luxury of flying with Elytra, in that case it's probably going to be a case of looking for it by boat. But once again, if you're out looking for shipwrecks, ocean monuments, that kind of thing, keep an eye on the horizon for areas of land that look like this with the large mushrooms growing on them. As far as biome temperature goes, they're pretty neutral, so you won't find them just adjacent to warm oceans or deep oceans or anything like that, as far as I know. But it is entirely possible to just randomly locate one of these as you're wandering around your world, and frankly, it is kind of worth it to get hold of some mycelium and some mushrooms. In terms of its unique properties, mycelium works basically like podzol that spreads, so you can plant mushrooms on it at any time of day where normally you would have to plant mushrooms on a block with lower light level, and unlike podzol, it is going to spread to any adjacent dirt blocks, meaning that you can farm this without having to completely regrow spruce trees on it. Like I said though, mycelium itself doesn't inherently have any unique spawning properties, so if you put mycelium elsewhere in the world, you're not going to prevent mob spawns, and you're not going to find mushrooms spawning there. Both of those properties are tied to the biome itself, not the blocks that make up the biome. With that said, mushrooms will not spawn on any other block than mycelium, so while they have to be spawning within the boundary of the mushroom biome, then they do also have to have mycelium to spawn on, in the same way that other animals prefer to spawn on grass. Knowing this, if we wanted to convert this entire island into a block other than mycelium, we could leave a small patch of mycelium here for the mushrooms to spawn on and make a pretty effective mushroom farm. But mushrooms are pretty fascinating creatures, so I need to go ahead and grab myself a couple of things. We need some tools, we need some wood, and I'll show you what these guys are capable of. Conveniently just south of our mushroom island, there is a savannah village where I can take down a couple of the local acacia trees and maybe loot the chests in the village for some iron. I'm also going to grab a couple of hay bales while I'm here, and it looks like they don't have a blacksmith here for some easy iron. I can't see an iron golem around anywhere either, so I think I have a set of shears in my ender chest. We'll just head back to the island before it gets dark. I'm intentionally leaving it dark for a couple of reasons, so I'll put a couple of torches around for the sake of lighting up the video, but I want to show you a little bit about what mushrooms can do. And yes, I do have a set of shears in here. Okay, that's a good start. So we're going to empty a water bucket out, and I'll show you that as with cows, you can milk mushrooms to get regular milk. So if you need to dispel potion effects or whatever, or you just want a tasty bucket of milk, you want to make a cake, any of that stuff, mushrooms can provide you with milk. But they can provide you with something else as well. If we turn some of these wood planks into bowls and we right-click on a mushroom with a bowl, they will give you mushroom stew for free, which is another fun food source that you can grab in abundance if you have a mushroom cow around here. Otherwise, mushroom stew has to be made out of the two different varieties of mushrooms and a wooden bowl in your crafting interface. So, frankly, it is much more convenient to just be able to milk a mob for it. Although mushroom stew doesn't stack, so calling it convenient is a little bit of a stretch. As with the other cows in the game, mushrooms can be fed wheat to breed, and eventually once they breed, they'll produce a baby mushroom, which is frankly one of the more adorable mobs in the game. You'll also notice that the baby mushroom doesn't have any mushrooms growing on its back yet, while the other mushrooms have 3 mushrooms growing on them. The idea behind mushrooms is that the fungus around here has kind of taken over the cows a little bit, but they can effectively be cured. And to do that, all we need to do is run up to a mushroom. We're going to do that with, I suppose, this one over here, and right-click it with shears. This kind of explosion effect occurs. You receive a few red mushrooms, from which you can make mushroom stew if you want to, I suppose, and the mushroom becomes a regular cow. Now, there is no way of making this cow a mushroom again. It is just going to be a cow pretty much forever, but that's fine. We can leave it around here and it will just hang out with the remainder of the mushrooms. Now, another thing can happen with these mushrooms incredibly rarely, and it can happen when you breed them together, but there's a very small chance of that happening, especially if I'm right-clicking on one that's already been fed. So let's see if we can find another one before the breeding cooldown runs out on this other one. When breeding 2 red mushrooms together, there is a very small chance, like a 1 in 1,000 chance, of the baby being a brown mushroom, a kind of variant using the brown mushrooms instead of the red mushrooms. And when that happens, the brown mushroom actually has some interesting properties when it comes to milking it for mushroom stew. This unfortunately does not extend to regular brown cows, which are just kind of brown incidentally and not brown because they have the mushroom thing going on. But if you feed a brown mushroom a flower of a specific type and then milk it for mushroom stew, you actually end up getting suspicious stew, normally crafted using a mushroom stew recipe and the flour in question, which can give you a little bit of extra status effect. It's the same suspicious stew that you can trade from farmer villagers as well, but if you know exactly what flour you're feeding the mushroom, then you can milk it for a specific kind of suspicious stew very easily. Unfortunately, aside from that 1 in 1,000 chance of them breeding a brown mushroom, the only way you can get a brown mushroom is to strike a regular mushroom with lightning, and that's not something we have the option to just do ourselves yet. We have the opportunity to control lightning later, but that requires us getting hold of a trident from the drowned, which are quite difficult to get hold of, at least on Java Edition. In the meantime, if you want to grow wheat here on the Mushroom Island, you can just keep breeding the mushrooms in the hope that they'll produce a different baby, but frankly, it's going to be a long process if you want to do that, so good luck to you if that's what you're going to attempt. And with the sun rising over here, I'm going to make myself a nether portal out here, because I want to be able to return to this Mushroom Island whenever I feel like it. We're going to set up a portal somewhere fairly central. We could always end up moving that later, but we'll take the coordinates of this portal, we'll make sure it gets linked up to our nether hub, and then we'll be able to return here whenever we want to. We might want to set up some fence gates in front of the nether portal here to make sure that the local mushrooms don't just wander in. Alternatively, we can place a couple of rails across the front of the portal, because mobs don't like wandering over rails. It can be any type of rail, doesn't have to be powered. That's just the ones I had in my redstone box in my ender chest. But if we set up rails like this, zombie piglins, when they spawn here, won't want to walk out of the portal, and hopefully the mushrooms won't want to walk in. So one of the things I'd like to do here is just gather a bunch of mycelium. Since it's a renewable resource, we could always convert a bunch of dirt into mycelium ourselves. We could do that kind of more manually if we want to, but I think while it's here in abundance, I'm just going to strip a bunch of the mycelium out of the local landscape. We could return with a bunch of dirt to restore this if we wanted to later, but bringing home a couple of stacks of this is going to mean we can use it for building later. And I kind of like the idea of building with mycelium. I've done it a couple of times in the past, and it can look like the ground is a bit more corrupted because it has this spooky, like, you know, purplish kind of vibe to it. It sort of reminds me of the corruption from Terraria, actually, when seeing as Minecraft has a crimson biome in the Nether now, then you can emulate the landscape of Terraria pretty effectively if you have the tools to do that. Having left so much dirt here from digging up that mycelium, I'm also going to do what I said I was going to do earlier and bring back a block of grass to show you quite how green the grass is here. We'll grab a bunch of grass from the savanna biome here, where the grass color is, of course, naturally very kind of golden and a little drier looking, and we'll pop down these 9 blocks of grass sort of randomly around here so that they can spread to the available dirt a little faster than the mycelium will spread inwards. And look at that! This is one of the cooler things about building in a mushroom island, I think, because the grass is just like neon green almost. It's such a vibrant, almost plasticky green that you can turn these islands, if you want to, from this sort of spooky purple color into something that looks almost like a toy box scenario. Like it's a very, very vivid green color, and as you can see, the grass is already starting to spread. But the mycelium is spreading to the dirt as well, so we'll probably just end up with a couple of patches of grass in amongst all the mycelium for now, and we can decide for ourselves whether we want to turn all of this into a grassy paradise later. I'm still going to use the rest of this week to breed a couple of cows on the off chance that 1 in 1,000 chance comes good for us, but I'm really not holding my breath on that score. It's also worth remembering that with Silk Touch, we can break down the blocks of these mushrooms and obtain our own mushroom blocks. So if we wanted to take these down, we can also get the stem blocks and they will appear separately. We can use these to build with if we want to, and you can even build your own custom mushrooms using the same blocks that make up the stems and caps of each of these. We'll do the same with one of the brown mushrooms over here. I'll grab the one that I started to take down earlier just for the brown mushrooms themselves. I like mushroom blocks a lot. I think they're pretty versatile, and they've got some really neat things you can do with them. For example, if we place a couple of mushroom blocks here and we place some more mushrooms along the edges of those and then take those away, you end up with the spore texture that you see underneath the caps of these regular mushrooms. But that doesn't happen when you place a different type of block adjacent to them. So if I take this acacia wood away, it doesn't reveal the spore texture. It's only when you place a mushroom block of the same type, like here, for example, with the red mushroom. If I place the mushroom stem alongside that, like so, and we take that away, that hasn't revealed the spore texture there. It does reveal the spore texture of the stem block, but the red mushroom cap and the stem block do not necessarily produce that reaction in each other. If I put some brown mushroom alongside that and take it away again, once again, same thing. So you can happily have these two types of blocks interact without them producing that result. But the brown mushroom, if we put it next to the brown mushroom, produces the spore texture on those faces of the block. And we can use that for a variety of different things. You can texture things with it pretty well. It kind of looks like another stage of dry sponge with a bit less of the yellow color. It's got that porous texture, and you can find a whole bunch of different stuff to use that for if you feel so inclined. If you silk touch it again, it just breaks down into a 6-sided mushroom block, so you can always go back on your mistakes if you find yourself making weird looking mushrooms every so often. So I'm going to breed these mushrooms for another night or two, and I'm going to stay up until I can show you one of the last things, one of the exceptions to the rules I mentioned earlier about Mushroom Islands. Because as the sun sets on, I think, our 4th night without sleep here on the Mushroom Island, we turn our eyes to the skies and expect the familiar shriek of the Phantom. Yes, unfortunately, despite the fact that Mushroom Islands should be free of hostile mob spawns, phantoms are the one exception to that, because they are really supposed to be figments of the player's imagination, in a way. They are the sort of insomnia phantoms that come out when you haven't slept for a little while, and they don't really require any kind of land to spawn on, therefore they ignore the typical hostile mob spawning rules that affect mobs spawning in a mushroom fields biome. They just spawn in the night sky regardless. So unfortunately, even if you are working with complete darkness out here and you're happy building without any kind of hostile mob spawning, you do need to sleep every other day just to make sure that phantoms do not spawn in the sky above you. But if, like me, you prefer working in the daylight and you're happy sleeping dying every so often anyway, then that's not always going to be a problem. And that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I'm going to head on back to my base and get ready to make some storage systems for the piglin bartering farm and various other bits and pieces, but that's going to do it for now. I hope you folks enjoyed this video. Have fun looking for mushroom islands in your own worlds. Thank you so much for watching. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.